Hi, everyone. I'm Alice, the social media manager for Jubilance, and I'm talking with Susan Patterson Newbeyer today. Susan is a former pilot currently based out of Arizona. So welcome, Susan. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I just want to start off with some more fun questions. What is your favorite dessert?
So I'll say blueberry muffins.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not a big sweet person, so uh I know it's a weird thing, but if I have a sweet tooth, it's more like a muffin kind of thing. Yeah.
Okay, those are really good. Yeah. What are you currently watching on TV?
So currently, I'm not really up to date with television, but I've been watching the Diary series. Have you ever seen it?
It's so good. I'm so in love
Yeah,
with Damon. Oh,
I know. Why over time? I mean, at first you're like, "Who is this guy?" And then as time goes on, you're like, "Yeah, he's like the best character." So I'm
yeah,
on about season
definitely.
4 right
Yeah,
now.
goodbye. What is the other one's name? Stefan.
Stefan.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as time
So
goes on, you're like, "Oh, I'm over him." Yeah,
good. That's
yeah.
really funny. Yeah. What is your must-have essential item in your purse?
Okay, so must-haves. Chapstick,
Oh,
number 1. Hair tie, number 2. And I don't think I have a third. Those are like my two. Those are my go-tos. Yeah,
okay. Those are really important.
those are important. Yeah,
Yeah,
girls need hair ties for sure. Yeah.
definitely. Can you talk about where you're living now in Arizona and what made you move
Yeah.
there? Are you from there originally?
No, I'm originally from Ohio, and I've been in Tucson on and off for probably a good 15 years now. And Tucson is awesome. Right now, this time of year is when we're just now getting really nice. And so fall time here, we don't get much of seasons, but this is when it finally goes from 100 degrees. We finally start getting like our nice 70-degree, 80-degree weather. And so right now everybody's opening their windows and starting to show up out hiking and outside in the middle of the day, which is like which just doesn't happen in the middle of summer here.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's amazing. What's
Yeah.
what's your favorite thing about Arizona?
I mean, honestly, the weather. The weather. Some people would say they would prefer cold, and I, and some prefer warm. I take the warm any day.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I completely agree. I'm from San Diego originally, and so
Oh, okay.
whenever winter strikes here in New York, it's just horrendous.
Yeah, and yeah, I totally understand. I like living out in Ohio. I lived in Milwaukee
Oh
for a while,
oh
and
my God,
the snow effect was, like 5 feet, 4 feet of snow sometimes.
that's horrible.
So going, so going from Arizona to that, and then I moved back to Arizona. It was a big relief not dealing with the snow, but I love it every once in a while. So like a good vacation in snow is great.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's nice.
yeah.
Yeah. So you have more of a atypical fall then, because you're getting kind of the summerish weather. Do you have
Yeah.
that you guys still do?
I have, uh, you know, I I'm not one that does a whole lot of like traditional stuff. When I was a kid, we did the Halloween, and I don't have any kids, and so therefore, some of that kind of falls out the window. But it is kind of a time of celebration where everybody does start coming out of the woodwork. So comparable to the East Coast, um, it's when you guys hit summer and you guys are all like rejoicing. You're like, we can finally come out with our shorts on, and so we can finally come out without the sun just burning us to death.
Oh my
So
gosh. Wow.
yeah, so not really anything formal, but it is cause for celebration once we hit that mark.
Yeah, that does sound awesome.
Yeah.
Can you talk to me about where you got to where you are? you are and were a female pilot. That's pretty amazing. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So, it's funny. I never viewed it as anything um, all that different until kind of after the fact of starting it, and even in the midst of doing it, I never thought of it as something very different. I grew up doing swimming, which is a co-ed sport, so a lot of practices and a lot of training is co-ed. And I went to a college that was a pretty liberal college, and like all the dorms were co-ed. So, so I never thought a whole lot about gender, and I think it's maybe just a personality thing that I've had. Um, it So getting into it, I can say the only thing that sparked it was I finished college. My dad had gotten his private pilot's license, which is the very first license you can get for a person to jump in a small little airplane all by themselves and go like kind of piddle around in the sky. And so I had finished coaching a swim team for the summer after I graduated, and my dad simply suggested, why don't you take some flying lessons? And it just opened up a whole can of worms. And I was in Ohio at the time, and so the circumstances, as you know, out on that side of the country, the weather is really hit or miss. And when you're first learning, you need clear skies. It's a lot easier when it's like just sunny. There's no rain. There's no clouds. That's how you have to learn. And so I started learning how to fly. Just a single engine, tiny little 4-seater airplane, and it and I did it on the weekends. I quickly realized doing it just on the weekends, you get some overlap. So if you only do it like, once or twice a week, you have to kind of go backwards to relearn some of the hand-eye coordination and stuff like that. So so I was doing that for a while and realizing I was just kind of going through money. I wasn't really getting anywhere. And I tend to be like a goal setter, like go big or go home kind of person. So I started looking on the internet. I found like a really big flight academy that was well known out in Arizona. Jumped in my car, took a road trip out to Phoenix, and checked out the flight school. And it was as simple as I just signed up. So it was like a full-time academy. And so I went to a full-time academy there. Went to a few other schools in between, and you have to go through a series of getting your different licenses. And so you have to learn how to fly, a single engine, and then you have to learn how to fly a twin engine, so for 2 engines. You have to learn certain powered airplanes, and then you go through a process of learning how to get your precision good enough to get what's called a commercial license. So I did all of that out in Arizona in various different flight schools. And then it was an opportunity to go out to New Mexico and do some jet training. So I learned how to fly a jet. That was all in simulators though. So I wasn't really in a real jet at that point. But I was out in Farmington, New Mexico for a while doing this program. A real small program, but it was really cool because it set you up to fly a jet, which is totally different from these smaller airplanes. And long story short, from there, I came to Tucson, and I got a flight instructing job. And so I taught people how to fly airplanes.
Wow.
And so this is kind of a fast forward through about maybe 3.5 years or so, maybe 4. And then I taught people how to fly for about 2.5 years. And then from there, which is an awesome thing to do, and it's really common for pilots to do that. They use teaching as a stepping stone to gain hours. So you want to gain hours to get to an airline.
Do you need a
if
certain
that makes
amount of
sense?
hours then?
Yeah. So to get to yeah, so to get to the airlines, they want you to have a certain amount of time in a twin engine small airplane. It doesn't have to be a jet, but it can be a small, a small twin engine, and just a certain amount of hours in general. And so I did that through flight instructing.
Wow.
Um, and that was quite an experience teaching people how to fly. And just from there, I went to the airlines and was at the airlines for a few years.
Wow.
Yeah, all really awesome, interesting experience. And it all just started with my my dad saying, "Why don't you just take a few lessons? Keep your mind and your body busy." And so he just opened up a can of worms.
That's amazing.
And and that's how I ended up in Arizona. Long story short, yeah.
What airlines did you fly for?
So I was with SkyWest Airlines. Sometimes you see it on your ticket, and sometimes they advertise, but they co-share. They're an airline that flies for Delta and for United.
Hmm.
And sometimes that changes. So, it's all kind of politics on who they fly under, but they are basically a commuter airline that flies these jets that are, they're not the really big ones. They're the ones that have like two seats on each side of the airplane.
Oh, okay.
So, those smaller, I
Yeah,
don't,
yeah.
if you've ever flown and there's two and there's two and two, as opposed to like two seats and then three and then two, or like two seats and then like three on the other side. So they're a little smaller, but the industry converted to those a lot because it was just
Yeah.
efficient. They could fill up airplanes easier. They weren't flying really huge jets around the country that were only half full. And so it became a really popular thing, and it still is to this day.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's really interesting. And
Yeah.
I see, like, when I poke my head into like the pilot's cabin,
Yeah.
there are the two pilots. How does that
Hmm.
work? Um,
Okay, so yeah, that's a good question. There's a few misconceptions about that. So a lot of times people ask which one is the pilot. Um, so the truth of the matter is they're both pilots,
wow.
and one's just in charge. So one's kind of the boss of the flight, and
Huh.
then the other one is the um, okay, when it comes to an emergency or when it comes to certain procedures, we each have our job. But the person on the left, so if you're walking in, the person on the left is the captain, and the person that is, I'm trying not to cover the camera, sorry.
Perfect.
Um, and then the person on the right is the first officer. And so I was a first officer the whole time.
Wow.
Um, I ended up getting an injury and never promoted to being the captain. Um, but essentially, the difference is if you have an emergency, the captain takes over. Or when it comes to kind of delegating, um, who's going to do the airplane checks or who's going to be doing all the paperwork, he'll delegate it, which is usually actually to the first officer. While he sits there and relaxes. Yeah.
Okay.
So I was always the first officer. But what you do is you switch off. So in a jet, it's a two-man crew. So that means that it is required that two people must be flying the airplane. There's jobs for non-flying pilot and for the flying pilot in an airline. And so you have to learn the role, whether you're a first officer or whether you're a captain. You have to learn the role as the flying pilot or as the non-flying pilot.
Oh,
And then so every flight you do, we switch on and off. And then and a lot of times the captains will be the ones that pick, which flights they want to do or which ones they prefer. And it depends on who you fly with. Some of them will leave it up to me and say, hey, which flights do you want? Do you want this one, that one? And so it totally depends on who you fly with. And so your roles just get reversed
huh.
when you're either the flying pilot or the non-flying pilot. So the non-flying pilot will run the radios, and run other various uh, little procedures here and there, while the main role of the flying pilot is to just focus on the airplane. Just focus on the flying, focus on all the digital autopilot, the mapping, if need be, the hand flying skills. The non-flying pilot is typically who coordinates and talks to the person, to the flight attendants and back, and to all the, sometimes you listen to, and the radio announcements of like, hi, welcome to where, wherever we're located, welcome to Austin today.
Oh, cool.
So that's the non-flying pilot's job, is to run all that work. And so that's kind of a little bit of a misconception that people don't understand.
That's
so
fascinating. I didn't know anything about that.
It's like kind of a secret world. That's part of what I got so fascinated with. When I wanted to be a pilot, I kept seeing these planes up high, these jets, and I thought, I just wonder what it's like up there. Like, what are they? And when they shut the door, I'm like, I want to know what they're doing. What are they doing up there? So that's like a little insight to it.
Oh, that is so cool. Thank you for sharing.
It is a neat kind of hidden world that a lot of people don't really know how it goes. So that's the gist of it.
Thank you. Can you talk about being a female in a male dominated industry?
Like I said, I grew up in such a co-ed environment, and I wouldn't say I was ever involved in like the typical segregation of like male versus female identity. And so I think every female could probably give you a different answer on what it was like. But I will say that in some ways it was just completely easy, and I didn't realize there was any difference between me, and there were some other females too. And we definitely, there was a unspoken code for sure that we stuck together. We all had each other's back. We all made sure we were okay. We took care of each other. We were, and we became friends, and so there weren't very many of us. And so when there were some of us, it was a really cool thing. So I had a lot of reasons why it didn't bother me at all. One thing I did notice is I did feel the need to overachieve a little bit, because there are a few male opinions out there that are naysayers. This day and age, it depends on the individual. You'll always find it. You're going to find the most open of characters, and you're going to find the most closed-minded of characters. And you never know which guy you're going to fly with that day. And so you have to be prepared. And so I definitely prepared myself in a way to make sure I was always above and beyond, crossed my T's and dotted my I's. Just to make sure I wasn't even just average. I wanted to be really, really conscientious to be above and beyond, because I wanted to make sure there was no stereotypes put there. The biggest hurdle, I think, was, I was treated with respect, which is great. It was awesome. I never had issues with a lack of respect. Sometimes I could tell in a male-dominated industry, they're so used to flying with other men that I always said, don't hold back. I'm just like everybody else. You can treat me the same as anybody else. And they would definitely mind their P's and Q's more. They would, I'm like, you can talk to me like I'm like, you can talk to me like any other, like any boy, any guy you would fly with. And I could say that, but they were definitely like under their best behavior. With a female. It's not a bad thing. It's definitely not a bad thing, but I definitely would know that they would come into work going, okay, I need to be under my best behavior to, with flying with a girl. And there were a couple times, so which sparked a comment that I made under your Facebook group,
Yeah.
is that I had times where I was with an all-female crew. I flight attendant, both pilots, and it was just amazing. It was an amazing experience because of just the comments you would get from uh, all the passengers realizing, and a lot of times coming on board they didn't know, but getting off the plane they would see, and they were like, we would get claps, we would get like high fives, and so it was
That's
totally neat
awesome.
experience when it would happen. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Um, and speaking of like a new subject, I guess, can you
Mhm.
talk about your PMS and like what you would experience every month, and then trying jubilance?
Totally. So I would say I've always definitely had PMS. When I was younger, so early 20s, mid 20s, it was very much like a physical pain. And then as I've gotten older, I'm 39 now, um, it gradually morphed into a mental issue where the moodiness, it turned into just massive amounts of anxiety. And um, and surprisingly, I just didn't, I honestly, it was like a Jekyll and Hyde that I couldn't figure out. I had to start tracking everything about my health to really figure out what it was. And this was probably about 3 or 4 years ago. So it was kind of in my mid 30s where I started getting like the more severe end of PMS. And it literally, tracking it, it literally started like I knew when I ovulated because I could tell by my mood and by my anxiety and my uh, ability to handle social situations. That's the way I'll put it.
I know.
And and it would increasingly get worse from that day. And there were times that it lasted even as long as 2 weeks. And so it turned into this joke that I'm like, I have like one good week out of the month. Um,
Oh, that's
and
terrible.
so I came across your product, and I actually, I'm really new to it. And I started it, and I noticed an immediate difference. And so I'd love to give you guys updates like as I continue to
Yeah,
use it.
thank you.
But there's so many products that you see advertised nowadays on Facebook and whatnot.
Mhm.
And one thing that I liked about you guys was that it was realistic. So you gave statistics that weren't like, you're cured, you're totally cured,
Yeah.
which is off, unrealistic. And I tried everything that, all the women out there that have this issue, I've tried all of it. I've tried lowering my stress level or my schedule. I've tried the antidepressants. I've tried my massive diet changes. I not birth control options, and nothing worked at all. Um, and so I came across this, and I thought, I just have nothing to lose. So let's give it a go. And so far it's been a month, so I'm new to the product.
Great.
But that very first month, and I know some people have said you have to let it build up for like a month or two. For me, it was pretty instantaneous, where um, I didn't get I was a good like 5 days out before my cycle, or I'm sorry, before my period would start. And I was like, I'm still human. Like, check me out. I'm human. This is
Yeah.
amazing. And then so I still had some symptoms, but they were so decreased. They were so much less.
Good.
Um, and so I had about maybe 3 or 4 days where I kind of got into that spiral a little worse.
Mhm.
And maybe for about 2 days it was like a full on. But just compared to before, there were days, I mean, it was almost like I have learned how to like schedule my life around this issue.
Oh,
um, and it's definitely, like I said, gotten worse as I hit my upper 30s.
Mm.
And so you kind of go into this like, and then they tell you menopause is even worse. Like,
God.
like, what's, how? So anyhow, yeah, it's been really amazing so far. Um, and, you
I'm
know,
so glad.
next cycle, I'll
Yeah.
send an update.
Yeah,
But
please keep us updated on how it's going.
yeah, but the
Love to hear.
statistics, and I love that you guys say, honestly, like it, we've noticed it works for most women, but not all of them.
Yeah.
Um, there's honestly, there still is maybe a little bit of irritability,
Mhm.
but decreased. The
Yeah.
for me, the biggest symptoms were depression and anxiety.
Mm.
And so they would be pretty debilitating. And it was almost like, well, which person am I? Am I the am I the person the first 2 weeks of the month or the last 2 weeks of the month? I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
And it almost had a really insane clarity for me this last month of like, okay, I'm not I'm not totally crazy here. There's something to it. Like, I don't just one week love all these things I love in life and then the next week hate everything, you
Yeah.
know?
And you
Um,
shouldn't be feeling that way, which is why this is something like
it's
as a
so archaic.
before too.
Yeah.
And like what we were saying before is that it like people don't talk about this and people don't like
Yeah.
things for this. And
Yeah.
as you were
And
saying, like 50% of the population has PMS. It's
yeah, and I
hard to
asked,
figure out.
and yeah, and I would ask other women too, and so I gathered that I'm maybe on the severe end, but I asked other women too, but they definitely are like, oh yeah, I'm just crazy and I can't stand it, and it's like, how do we all do this? I have no clue.
Every month.
How every single month. So like, power to women for putting up with it. Like, men have no idea. They have no clue.
Seriously.
They have no clue.
Yeah. We just hope that jubilance can
And
be
I'm glad they don't,
like,
but
yeah, we just hope it can be something that can like really help women. It like we're from
yeah.
a business, like a like, and so I started taking this in college like 5 years ago, because
Oh.
my dad and mom did some research on oxaloacetate and they were like, "You're having a terrible time. Try this."
So they recognized it. Okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so I tried
Yeah.
it and I felt so much better. And then
That's
kept
amazing.
hearing from like other doctors that different women that were coming back and saying, this is helping my PMS. So that's why we did the clinical trials last year, because it was like me and some like other women who like
Yeah.
were really being helped by it. So
Uh-huh.
if we can help others, that's the goal. And to
And
like,
so your parents had an indication that there was this like a kind of blood sugar stabilizing agent.
yeah. So,
Because that's so cool that somebody was able to just point it out to you,
mhm,
and you're like, hey, try this.
yeah, I need.
Because for the longest time, I didn't even understand what was happening to me, because my issues started so early that I'm like, this couldn't be PMS. Like, this is so early. Like, I'm not even close
Yeah.
to the time where I should be having PMS. But as I tracked it and tracked it, it really was the case. It was like,
Ugh,
uh, uh, yeah, it was night and day.
it's
And so I'm
figure it out.
seeing the results too, where I'm like, this could, I'm new to it, and I've been taking it almost a full month now, but
Great.
I can see how it can potentially be like a game changer, and just your, how you can deal with life. Like, it
Yeah.
just makes, especially after you've had to learn how to deal with it, and then you're like, wait, I don't have to,
Wait, I don't have to now. Yeah.
or I have to this some,
Just a little
like,
bit. Yeah.
yeah, a little bit, yeah,
Yeah. And I
yeah, no
mean, it
problem.
is like that stabilizer. It's not, it's just, it's making your, like the peaks and waves of like your emotions
That
kind of just flow a little bit more. So you're
you
still getting the ups and downs, but just like
Yeah,
not as much.
you just described it perfectly. So I made a little post, and it was kind of a joke about yeah, there's like this snapping turtle effect. And it seems like the snapping turtle was muffled this last month. You
Yeah.
know, I could still feel a little quicker to get anxious, or a little quicker to be um you know, just slower in my step and my enthusiasm. But there was such a buffer to it that it was awesome,
That's
Alice.
great.
It was cool. Yeah.
Good. I know. I
Yeah.
always feel like I just want chocolate all of the time. So it's
So
good.
many
You
people
felt
say
like
that. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
yeah,
I can't relate to that very much.
that's great.
This might be
Stay away.
something totally different, but my anxiety would get bad enough that I couldn't eat.
Mm,
Um, and so by the last like 8 or 9 days, um, I was just trying to like live off liquids, because my stomach was so anxiety ridden that I couldn't eat.
oh my
This
God.
last month, I was like eating sandwiches. I'm like,
Good.
what is this? I want a sandwich right
Food is the best.
now. I mean, I think most women might kill me for saying that, because I most people get pretty heavy cravings, but mine was the opposite, where it would just shut my system down completely. Like I couldn't handle food very well.
Wow.
Um, and so now, like I'm out buying all the. I was just like kind of pigging out. So to me, I was like, this is amazing. I'm pigging out.
That's
Yeah,
that's awesome. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So maybe not on the typical spectrum, but maybe somebody can relate to it out there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thanks for sharing, Susan. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And I just want to know, like, what's next for you? So you were piloting. What are you going to do now? What are you up to?
So what I've been up to, I ended up having kind of a nasty spinal injury,
Oh my
and
gosh.
so I went through a couple surgeries, and the last surgery was 2016, and I had a spinal fusion in my lumbar spine. And so it's taken probably a good couple years to recover from that, and I also have some residual aftermath and chronic pain that I've been dealing with.
Mhm.
So I've been nipping that in the bud, just step by step, little by little. I did something called the ketamine therapy, which is it's a whole new subject. It's a little controversial, but it is meant to nip chronic pain in the bud. So I was having chronic pain in my spine from these surgeries and from the injury, and so I just started kind of getting back on track. But in the meantime, when I was taking time off from the injury, I've been breeding a hybrid cat called a Savannah, and it
Oh,
was just something. It was just something that I thought, what is something that I would love to do that never in a million years I could possibly do as a pilot? Like, let me just think. And so that's what I chose a few years ago.
that's so
Um,
cool.
and so it's a hybrid cat, and which it's a mix between an African serval. It kind of looks like a miniature cheetah, I guess.
That's awesome.
um, and so it's a mix between that and a domestic cat. And so
Huh.
there's a lot of information
Wow.
behind the Savannah cat. But so what I've been up to in the meantime, when I've been home a lot and just, not feeling that great physically from surgery and recovery, is I had been working on this breed and working with some of the kind of the founders. It's a very new breed of cat, and so working with some of the founders of it. And so I'm kind of slowly closing that chapter right now. Um,
So
and
interesting.
deciding like what's my next, what do I want next. And I broke my foot, so I'm on hold until about probably until the end of the year. And it's a great time to just take it easy and
Yeah.
enjoy stuff. I started taking the guitar lessons,
Cool.
just trying to get into things to see like, what do I love doing
Yeah.
now, what's the newest like stuff that I love. Always a possibility that I go back to aviation, um,
Cool.
if I want to. I'm still debating if it's a been there, done that. It was awesome, or if it's something that I want to revisit.
Wow. That's
Yeah,
amazing. That's so
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. So it's been kind of, I get a little bit of time off at the time being.
That's
Um, not gonna, not gonna hate it.
yeah. That's great.
Yeah.
To just leave off today, I just want to ask you if you had one piece of advice for like women out there, just like a sentence or two, like what would it be about really anything?
Yeah. You know what? Never hold back regarding gender. Never, never hold back. Um, I I could say one time in my life, I had a thought where I really wanted to join the drums in high school. And it was probably the only time that I really thought like in terms of gender. And I thought, I tested actually highest for the drums, and
Uh,
I I didn't do it because I was like, it's just all the boys are doing it, and it and so I picked up a doing the flute because that was what all the other girls were doing. I
uh,
hated it, dropped it right from the get go. Just it wasn't me.
mm,
Um, so at the end of the day, male or female, I'd like to think we are equal, and we're also different. There is truth to the fact that we have different strengths and weaknesses, but at the end of the day, we are equally capable of everything. We're all human, and every human has a strength and a weakness. But
mm,
when it comes down to it, never keep your dreams inside. Like the worst thing you can do with your life is just hold on to those dreams and it just be a dream. Like let them come out, express them, and you're automatically going to fail if you don't try. Um, I'm no superwoman. I was no perfect student. I'm just that average person that came along and had a dream and chose it and went for it.
mm,
And sometimes dreams aren't easy to achieve, but they're so worth it compared to the pain of not doing one or not allowing yourself to. Um, and so that's a big thing that I would really, really want to express to women and anybody, to just like get out there and start doing. Just start doing. Dreaming, it doesn't get you anywhere except for that pain inside of wanting it. So take the baby steps. Um, that's the best advice I can offer.
mm. Thank you so much, Susan. Is
Yeah.
there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I can't think of anything. Do you have any more questions?
No, this was awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for being on today.
Great. I loved being on. Thank you so much for having me, Alice.
Yeah, it was nice getting to meet you. And please do keep us updated. Yeah,
Yeah, I will for sure. I will
how it's for
keep you
you.
updated on the group site.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Good.
Yeah, I've been pretty excited about it. So
Good.
I
Yeah,
will
continues to help.
update number 2 coming up in a couple weeks.
Great. Perfect. Okay.
Yeah.
Have a great rest of your day, Susan.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you,
Thank you
Alice.
for being on.